Max Wertheimer was born in 1880 in Prague, which was part of Austria-Hungary at the time. He passed away in 1943 in New Rochelle, New York, USA. He was a prominent psychologist and philosopher, best known for founding Gestalt psychology. Gestalt is a German word meaning form or whole. Wertheimer and his colleagues argued that the mind perceives things as whole structures, not just as a collection of individual parts. This was a radical break from elementalist or atomist psychology, which tried to reduce experience to isolated sensory elements. The key principle here is, the whole is different from the sum of its parts. This is Wertheimer's foundational experiment that launched Gestalt psychology. When two lights blink on and off rapidly at different positions, people perceive motion, even though no actual motion exists. This illusion of motion, known as the phi phenomenon, can't be explained by analyzing each stimulus separately. It demonstrated that perception is based on how the brain organizes information, not just on raw sensory data. Wertheimer published his findings in experimental studies on the perception of movement in 1912. Wertheimer identified principles the brain uses to organize sensory input into meaningful wholes. Objects close together are grouped together, which is known as the principle of proximity. Objects that look alike are grouped, referred to as the principle of similarity. We follow lines and patterns rather than abrupt changes, which is the principle of continuity. We fill in gaps to perceive a complete object, known as the principle of closure. And lastly, we distinguish an object or figure from its background, which is the principle of figure ground. These principles are used today in design, interface usability, and visual perception research. This was his major theoretical work in applied psychology and education. Productive thinking involves deep understanding and restructuring of problems, not just memorizing rules or facts. Reproductive thinking or rote learning fails to foster real understanding. Wertheimer promoted insight-based learning, where the learner sees the whole problem structure and the solution emerges naturally. A famous example is a child solving a math problem not by trial and error, but by seeing the entire relationship between numbers and grasping a holistic solution. Wertheimer was critical of structuralism, like the work of Wundt and Titchener, for breaking mental processes into elements. He also critiqued behaviorism for focusing only on observable behavior, ignoring mental organization and consciousness. He believed that experience and behavior should be studied in context, and that meaning arises from relationships within wholes, not isolated units. Cognitive psychology. Gestalt ideas shaped the rise of cognitive science and how we understand perception, memory, and learning. In education, Wertheimer's emphasis on insight influenced progressive education models. In design and user experience, the principles of perceptual grouping are fundamental in graphic design, web interfaces, and visual ergonomics. His work also influenced how psychologists study creativity and reasoning in problem-solving research. Experimental studies on the perception of movement in 1912 introduced the phi phenomenon. Laws of organization in perceptual forms in 1923 outlined perceptual grouping principles. And Productive Thinking in 1945 was a landmark book on learning, reasoning, and problem-solving. Wertheimer co-founded Gestalt psychology with Wolfgang Kohler, who studied chimpanzee problem-solving and emphasized insight, and Kurt Koffka, who wrote extensively on perception and child psychology. Together they challenged reductionism and emphasized that meaning and understanding come from wholes, not parts.